we have been through this thing before, right? 30 years ago, the topic of walled gardens was big, right? CompuServe, AOL, bulletin board systems like the Well, they were all these large communities, some of which were structurally really important. Like CompuServe was pretty much where journalism happened. The Well was the entire West Coast tech ecosystem. Kevin Kelly, Stuart Brand, all that set were over there. All those things started out not interoperable. They grew out of bulletin board systems in the 1980s where you literally phoned in to send messages. And then gradually these things kind of got merged into the internet and everything became interoperable, and you sort of wound up with the modern equilibrium we have now, forming over about 10 years. But at the time, it was not obvious that that was going to happen, right? People fought really hard for those standardization processes, and it produced a set of things like Internet Engineering Task Force, IETF, which is the thing that makes the internet as we know it possible, right? All that kind of 90s era, even late 80s era standardization machinery that was built, those were the international platforms that allowed us to build an interoperable internet rather than having a bunch of completely separate systems with gateways and bridges between them, right? The fact that we don't have an internet where every message has to be technically translated and retranslated between different standards when you send a message, the fact that we got this system where everybody's using the same stuff rather than gateways and bridges and translation layers and all the rest of that kind of stuff, that was a multi-year political effort, probably a multi-decade political effort, that is still running, right? IETF still exists. I'm in the process of writing a policy paper right now to try and help do a little terraforming of the political shenanigans in America around the blockchain. Now that we've finally come to the attention of elected politicians, we're going to take a serious kicking here unless we get our game together politically. And a lot of what I'm trying to point out in that paper is that the reason blockchain is such a mess, and it is a horrible mess technically, is that we never built bridges to IETF. If Bitcoin had become part of the Internet Engineering Task Force, if Ethereum had become part of the Internet Engineering Task Force, if all the L2s were in the same standards machinery that the mainstream internet is in, and we were hashing all of this stuff out with IETF support, we would probably be 5 years ahead of our current position. Right? We're working all this stuff out from scratch, and it's completely pointless because we're already in a society that was built by successful technical standards bodies, which have machineries and processes and coordination mechanisms that are proven to work for people like us solving problems like these. And I think that the reinvention of all of that stuff outside of the IETF is one of the worst political mistakes that we've made in the space, because as we get into the part where we have to really seriously negotiate with government, having the broad-based engagement that something like IETF gives us basically makes us into legitimate players in the global governance game rather than being kind of offshore pirate weirdos, which is unfortunately the brand that we've inherited from 15 years ago. So I think that this standardization game, we could set up our own standards bodies, but I think that is a structural error. And what we should be doing is we should be negotiating with IETF and getting those doors open. Because if we could get IETF to accept responsibility for blockchains and blockchain standardization, I think the amount of political support that we'll get from that as a result is incalculable. And if anybody has opinions on that, I am in the process of writing some of the policy paperwork necessary to start those conversations going. And I'm talking to some of the folks from Centre for a People-Centered Internet that are in the right kind of circles and the right kind of language.